One great strategy for keeping your research organized is using note cards. To follow along with this video, make sure you have access to Google Scholar, a stack of note cards, some writing utensils, or one writing utensil works, and some patience. This can be a lengthy process, and I messed up a couple of note cards already, and you might too, and that's okay. Just keep going at it. You'll be fine. So first, pull up a source you're pretty sure that you're going to use for your paper. And at this point, many of you are probably using Google Scholar. So I have pulled up a source on Susan B. Anthony, and I have all of the information, almost all of the information I need there on the side. And of course, this is a very long source, and so I'll take my time going through it. But we're not really concerned with that right now. I'm mostly concerned with these source cards. So on your first note card, you're going to label it A. But before I get really into that, let me go over the different types of sources you might come across and what sorts of information you should be putting on each of those sources. So the one that is the most common that you will get from Google Scholar are articles from academic journals. And you can see there, the first bit of information you want to make sure you have is the last name and first name of the author. And this is actually how you're going to put it into your Works Cited page. So for me, personally, it's just easier to do last name, comma, first name. Then you need to make sure that you have the article title, the journal, magazine, or newspaper name, New York Times, Harper Collins or Harper Weekly, or whatever that title is there. The date of the publication, you're also going to need to write down. And for some print sources, it's just the year. Oftentimes, though, for magazines and articles, you'll find an actual day or at least the month and year. If you have accessed this article from online, which academic articles we mostly access online nowadays, then you need to make sure that you have the URL. And the URL is really simple. Sometimes people don't realize that's the name of it. But in that top bar of your browser, your internet browser, is the URL. And it is super, super long for a lot of these sources. So my advice is that you go ahead and use that save the article or add to my library that was talked about in the previous video. And you just add it. This one's already been added. And so that way when you go back, you can look up the full URL, and for now just sort of write down part of it so that you can make sure you match it up later. You just want to make sure that when you put that URL into your Works Cited page, that you have the full address and not just the shortened one you write down on your note card. And then last, you want to put down the date that you first accessed this source, which for today would be May 7th or 8th, I'm not sure. So that's the first source that you're probably going to come across. The next one is books. And books, there are going to be some in the library, and I will be sure to make set aside some time for us to go as a class, and I can help you search for some books. But TMAC has decided, and I love that he did this, that if you come across a book on Google Scholar, which you'll be able to see if it says ebook or something like that, then you can count that as a print source and not only an internet source. So again, you'll put the last name and first name of the author, the title of the book, and then you're going to have to go to the first couple of pages of the book, and you'll find all of the publishing and copyright information. And that will have the publishing company, and it will have the year of publication. The next source, in fact, a couple of people have already found sources that fall under this category, and they're websites that are not articles. So history.com or something like that. Always, last name, first name of the author. The title of the web page, which I will go over when we go through more specifics on this source. The name of the website, the date of the publication, and often on a website, as it says here, it'll be at the very bottom. Sometimes you'll get an exact day. Maybe it was the last day it was updated, but oftentimes it's really just the year that it was published or updated. Then you need to make sure that you put down the company, organization, or university associated with that website. ANE Networks is for history.com. You might come across Columbia University or a special organization that has professionals working for it that's dedicated to a particular topic. And then this is a website, so you want to make sure you put down that URL, that web address up in the top bar of your internet browser. And again, the date that you first accessed this source. Lastly, you might come across some documentaries, and these are great sources, especially for auditory and visual learners. And I personally learn a lot from documentaries, and I've started to get acquainted with some professionals in various fields because documentaries aren't just random people who are interested in these topics. They're actually professionals who study these topics, publish on these topics, and have degrees in these different areas. So documentaries are a little bit simpler when it comes to the citation, the title of it, the director, performances by, so any people that are in it, production company, is it, well, I don't even know any that are history, but, production company would be like Warner Brothers or Disney or something like that, and then the year it was released. So to start off your source cards, you first want to pull up that first source. If it's on Google Scholar, then pull up to that front page, and you're going to write down that information on it. But first, to keep it organized, you're going to put an A in the top left-hand corner. And then I'll show you why it's A when we start going over the fact cards that you'll get from this source. So then I have the author's name. This is for an article from an academic journal. So you have the author's name, the title of the article right here. Then I made up some of this information. Don't you do that, because I'll be checking on your sources. And Mr. Reynolds does go through each and every senior paper, so this is FYI for next year, to check to make sure that your sources are authentic. So I made this up. This would be the title of the journal, the date that it was published, and then this really awesome title I'm sure a lot of you will enjoy, the URL, www.gofeministyoudirtyliberals.org. Notice it's a .org. It is not a .com. It is not a blog. It is from an actual organization that has a greater chance of having valid information on it. And then the date that I accessed it, 8 May 2019. So I've got my first source card here. And yes, this is a tedious process. You've got to go through and write down all of your information. But once you do, it's going to make the rest of your paper, especially those technical parts like the works cited page, so much simpler than it would be otherwise. So I've got my A card here, and every time I write down a piece of information from this source, I am going to put A and a number at the top. A1. Notice this card is not full of different quotes and pieces of information. I have limited it to one piece of information. This is really going to help when we start to do our outline, because we're going to start out with a hands-on outline. And that's going to be nice for you kinesthetic hands-on learners and visual learners like me who need to see where the information goes and how it all connects and in which order it should all go in. My advice when it comes to writing down information is to use direct quotes. And this is for a couple of different reasons. The first big reason is that this will help you avoid plagiarism. And you can put in direct quotes in your history paper. In fact, I encourage you to do that, at least one per page. For your senior paper, it's going to be one per paragraph. So be prepared next year to up that requirement. Once you have a direct quote and you can just transfer that into your paper, you don't have to worry about misquoting your source or forgetting, was this exactly what the source said, or was it something, did you reword it? Is it something that you would have said? The second reason why I advise you to do this is that you won't write down anything incorrect. And I have seen people do this before. They're so stressed out and they're going so fast and they've got so much on their plate with this history paper and every other area of their lives that they write down the wrong information because they're just trying to put it down in their own words. So if you've got the quote, you're more apt to double check it against your source before you call it good. So this one is a direct quote. It's definitely something that I would use in this paper because the beginning of it is going to be autobiographical, or not autobiographical, biographical. And so once I've got that piece down, I'm going to keep it with my A card so it all stays organized and together. I've got my second piece of information here, and I put A2 there at the top. So I know that it's going to go with this source here, A. I put it in a direct quote. This is something that would probably go at the beginning of my paper because it's about her personal life again. And it's just one piece of information. It's not a whole bunch of different things crammed onto one card. Remember, this is a history paper, not a history test. Haha. Yeah, I know all your tricks. Okay? So that's basically how you go through it and get down all of your information on your cards. The last thing that I want to make sure I impart to you is that when it comes to doing websites, it can get a little confusing. There are a whole bunch of different pieces of information on websites that we don't usually look at because we just search up a website, go to it, and read it. So when you're looking at the title of the web page, that's going to be the big title going across the front that is specific to that particular page and more than likely specific to your paper. So let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's not see my fat arms too much. History.com. That's so annoying. Wow. Okay, that's better. So, this right here is going to be the title. Oh, touchscreen. This is going to be the title of my website, Susan B. Anthony. History.com is the title of this whole, or this is my web page. Sorry if that's confusing, because that's sort of like if this were a journal or a magazine, this would be the article in it. And then history.com is the title of the entire website that's got a whole bunch of different web pages on it, not just Susan B. Anthony, Martin Luther King Jr., Jesse Owens, Wyatt Earp. Notice I'm naming off some of your topics. And I would write that down as the website, and this would be equivalent to the title of the magazine. So there are some correlations between the different ways to cite various sources. Leave me alone, it's 11 o'clock. Notice here it's got an updated date, when it was last updated, and that is what I would write down for the publication date. And as I said earlier, the A&E Networks is the organization or the company associated with this. what's beautiful, it's got some history or some citation information down there. That's really beautiful. But notice, publisher right there, A&E Television Networks. So you would write that down as the company or organization that is associated with this entire website. So for this paper, you're going to need a total of 5 sources. 2 of those sources should be books, which we already talked about, could be those books that you find on Google Scholar. Typically, it'll say ebook or it might be in a PDF file. And the other 3 sources can be documentaries, articles, or interviews. What you do need to make sure about your interviews is that they come from legitimate people. So let's say that you are doing World War II and your grandma was alive around World War II, which would mean she's as old as my grandma, so that's interesting. But anyway, let's say she was around during World War II, but she was not a politician. She was not a soldier. She just was an American citizen at that time. She may not be a good source unless you're talking about women during World War II who worked in factories or lived in Modoc County, and she fits that profile. A really good source, if you're talking about what it was like to be in the war, would be an actual soldier. Hearing stories secondhand from your parents or grandparents or other family members are really good and interesting for us, and they definitely add to the wealth of information we have about different events that have happened in American history. But you have to remember that people's memories fail them. Sometimes we might hear something and it gets changed as it goes from person to person. And so that's why we teach you how to do good research, how to cite your sources, how to find good sources, because we want to make sure the information is as accurate as possible and that it's verifiable. If you only hear one thing from one person and no one else can corroborate that, it's not verifiable. But if you can find a story from a Vietnam soldier, that then you can talk to other Vietnam soldiers or look up information about them on the internet, Google Scholar, different documentaries that have been done. Now you can corroborate that information. It's verifiable. It's not just one person. There are a bunch of people that have had that experience or have that opinion about the Vietnam War. Our next video is going to be about organizing your note cards, which, by the way, you need a total of 25 note cards. You're going to have 5 sources and 5 cards for each of those, and that's not including the source card. This may seem like a lot, and I've already got some shocked reactions to that. But it's a good place to start for you as a junior, because next year as a senior, you're going to need 50 note cards. And you do have a lot longer period of time to work on it, and so it sort of evens itself out, I guess. But this is a good way to introduce you to this technique. Remember, this is indeed a lot of work. However, as I have told you many, many times before, I will not assign you anything I don't think you can handle. Lots of juniors have done this paper before you. I have worked with Mr. Reynolds and TMAC and other teachers at other schools on how to best write papers, teach students how to write papers, research, everything that goes into it. And so I know that you can do this. I am here when you need help, but let's start working on independent work ethic. So try all of this on your own first. Talk to a friend, even if you have somebody in AP or who is a senior and is good at this kind of stuff. Talk to them and see if they can help you. And then after that, if you're just still not sure, come talk to me. Email me, send me a text on Remind. Come talk to me in person and we can set up a time after school or during lunch, or if you're free 7th period, you cannot skip a class. If you're free 7th period, we can set up a time for you to come in. But it's better if you try to figure stuff out on your own and write down questions as you go, because then I'll be able to help you more efficiently. We won't have to start back at square one. And that reminds me, last thing I'll say is, as you are watching this video, if you have questions, write them down. And then if you have to rewatch the video or talk to somebody else to get an answer, that's fine too. But again, I'm here for you. Happy researching.